Well, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to this video lesson on World War I military technology and battles. I am Miss Jennifer Blank, and I will be your guide on this journey. This is our second installment, and today we will be talking about part 2, okay? So we talked about part 1 in the last video, went over some important military technology, pardon me, and today we're going to focus on these battles listed here. So without further ado, let's just get to it. All right, so I wanted to have this slide here because I wanted to let you know that I adapted and took a lot of, or borrowed, as we say in education, a lot of the information I'm going to give you today from this website right there. It's a great resource. It's from the Imperial War Museum, okay? So it's from the UK. It's got some good stuff there, not just about battles, but about all sorts of things that are war-related. So we'll be using this quite a bit throughout our time together. All right, so let's talk about the first Battle of the Marne. All right, this is early, like basically right at the start of the war, right? It's September 1914. Germany ended up losing this battle, but that is not really its key significance. All right, the key significance actually lies in that it marked the end of mobile warfare on the Western Front. So here we really have the start of trench warfare, which we're going to spend a great deal of time in class discussing. We're going to read some poetry, and we're going to look at some art that was inspired by the horrors and trials and just awfulness that was trench warfare. But in addition to that, it also had some important strategic implications, we call it, but important issues with how the various sides would plan their plans of attack going forward in the war. So the reason why that the Germany lost this battle is they did not plan on the Russians mobilizing as quickly as they did. They thought the Russians would take a while to get their act together. And like we've said in previous video lessons, nobody learns from history. The Russians get it done. You do not mess with Russia. Just don't go there. Like, you do not underestimate Russia, okay? Now, in the Battle of Tannenberg in August, Germany actually won a victory, okay? But when you combine victory in the East with defeat here, what that actually told everybody was that the war would not be quick. People really walk into every war that starts. It's like, oh, yeah, it's fine. We're just going to plow right through them. It's going to be fine. No problem. Wars are rarely fast. They drag on and they bring everybody down with them. They always last longer than you think. So when a politician is telling you, hey, let's go to war, it's going to be fast. It's going to be fine. No problem. You know, well, we're still in Iraq and Afghanistan. So there. But at any rate, that's separate. That's a lesson for another day, right? Okay, so the Battle of Jutland. This was a couple years later in 1916. It actually started in May and continued through June. But as you can see, May 31st, June 1st, 2-day battle, you know. Now, this is significant because it was the largest naval battle of the war, okay? It was also extremely bloody. So you have about 250 ships and 100,000 men that were involved in this war. And that's when you think about the amount, having that happen at sea. That's a big number, okay? It's a lot of men on a lot of ships. This actually, winning here, enabled Britain to implement a blockade that would actually directly lead to Germany's defeat in 1918. So the Brits lost 14 ships and 6,000 men, but because their Navy was so superior, like so awesome, they were ready to hit it again the next day. Like, nah, they didn't even need to take a nap. Like, they're like, let's go, no problem. The Germans, however, lost 11 ships and 2,500 men, and their Navy wasn't completely destroyed, but they were like, no, they were wiped out almost. There was no way they could ever take it to Britain again in the North Sea. So this was a victory for Britain largely, even though they lost more ships and lost way more men. They had more ships and men to lose, and Germany just didn't. So in this instance, they ended up coming out on top. All right, Battle of Verdun. Battle of Verdun is like known for this trench warfare business. And like I said, we're going to be discussing that in detail in class. So this went from February to December. Like, look at that. That's crazy. February to December. That is that's almost a year. That's a long battle, right? So it's the longest battle of the war. It was also one of the costliest, as you would imagine. Fighting for that long, you're going to lose a lot more people and a lot more stuff. So there was a 10-hour opening bombardment where never before had the world ever seen such a concentration of people blowing stuff up, of just sheer death and destruction and explosions. It was unprecedented means it's like never before seen, like nothing that has happened before can even come close to it. The French were forced back, but they didn't break. This is going to be really important. They held the line. They did not give up, and Germany's win was not total. Okay. Now, what's also important about this is that this is kind of like a September 11th for us, or a Pearl Harbor for the Americans, that the trauma of this loss and the fact that the French held the line really it left a lasting effect on the French people, how they view themselves politically, militarily, diplomatically, who they are. It really strongly influenced modern French culture. Also, it affected French political and military decision-making, both during and after the war as well. So this battle was significant for a number of reasons. Losses. Let's talk about losses. So Germans lost over 430,000, and French was about 550. So the French did lose more, but again, the sense of strength and resilience that they gained from this battle was very significant. Now, what are the strategic implications, the strategic concerns we need to think about for the rest of the war? So the Allies had originally planned to defeat Germany through a lot of large coordinated offensives. So basically you have multiple countries coming together, coordinating together, and then going full boat against Germany en masse, just all of them together, boom. But the German attack at Verdun really messed up that plan, because it massively reduced the number of troops that were available from France to join in these coordinated offensives. So Britain would have to be the big cheese and would have to be the one that was driving the big push on the Western Front. We'll talk more about that in detail in class. So what this basically does is put the burden on Britain. The French were not able to shoulder as much of it as they ordinarily would have been able to shoulder because of so many losses that they took in this battle. All right, the Battle of the Somme. Battle of the Somme, this is another big one. All right, this was a joint operation between British and French forces. So what their goal was to get a decisive victory against the Germans, to really weaken their control on the Western Front of the war. This was a very, very important battle. So for Britain, this was actually the most painful, most traumatic, I guess you could say, episode of World War I for them. That was the biggest deal of a battle for them of World War I. This was a 7-day bombardment, okay, that happened prior to the attack on July 1st. They thought they would achieve a quick military breakthrough, right? That's what they planned for. See, again, when you plan for quick, you have to plan for slow, right? You just don't plan for quick, hope for quick, plan for slow. But instead of being a quick breakthrough and, knock out Germany, no. It became a long, drawn-out, deadlocked, bloody, traumatic battle. So, losses. More than 1 million men from all sides were killed, wounded, or captured. British casualties in the first day. This is just the first day. Just the first day. 57,000. One day. And of that 57, over 19,000 were killed. This is the bloodiest day of battle in all of British history. If you look at throughout all of British history, British military history, which goes all the way back to before we're in, triple digits for dates, right? This is the bloodiest battle they've ever seen. It represents the loss and apparent futility of the war, the idea that we lose so much and what are we achieving? We just keep fighting and we keep doing it. We keep getting killed and we're advancing nowhere, we're not moving. Nothing is changing. We just all keep fighting and dying. Now, the issue with this, though, despite all the loss, it was necessary. British commanders did learn a lot of lessons from this. Sometimes you gotta get knocked down, right? Universe has to just smack you down, so you learn your lesson, and then when you get back up, you're better off for having learned the lesson. And that was definitely the case with the Battle of the Somme. The lessons that they learned from this, they actually learned them and made different decisions, better strategy came out of this battle. So that was a positive. All right, the Ypres campaign. This happened between July and November in 1917, so we're now moving towards the end of the war. So this symbolized, this war for a lot of people, my email keeps popping up, symbolized the horrors. Here we go. Yes, I like Godiva. Yes, okay. So symbolized the horrors associated with the war on the Western Front. Ypres was a Belgian town, and it ended up being a key battleground throughout the entire war, not just the town itself, but its immediate surrounding areas. Both sides suffered heavy casualties, but the Brits did not make any strategic gain, which was a problem. Now, what really needed to happen was that the British needed this important rail junction. And if they got this junction where rail cars can, come together, they can ship goods back and forth, they can resupply different units where they were fighting, or stop the enemy from resupplying their units. This was really, really important, because what they wanted to do was hurt Germany's ability to maintain their power in Flanders. So success here basically would allow the Brits to threaten the German submarine base. Okay. Now, the German U-boat campaign was a big problem for Great Britain because it was so successful. There was actually a lot of risk of defeat just from those U-boats. As we talked about in the previous lesson, they were very, very dangerous, almost impossible to guard against and destroy. They were coming at you from underneath the water. And it was such a new technology, nobody had developed countermeasures or counterattack methods to deal with them. So the Brits really needed to strike at German submarine bases somehow, before the subs actually got out in the water. They need to get them while they were grounded, or docked, it would be the proper term. Many soldiers felt completely demoralized at the end of this because the British didn't advance and they took heavy losses. And at this point, one of the most important field marshals, this guy Haig, the government's confidence in him hit a low point, which is going to change some strategy going forward. All right, the final battle we're going to talk about today, the Battle of Amiens. This was in 1918, so this is right at the end, right before the end, right? This was the start of the 100 Days campaign, and this was going to be key because the 100 Days campaign was a 4-month period of unadulterated Allied kicking Germany's butt, right? Allied forces just going out there and kicking butt and taking names, right? So, the 4-month period of that. So that's some good times right there. So the Germans previous to this had launched what they called the spring offensives, where they were just going at the Allies in multiple places, multiple times. So this was the Allied forces counterpunch to that, their counterattack. This marked a massive change in tide of the war, okay, because the 100 Days led directly to an Allied victory, because from this point on, Allies were constantly on the advance and Germany was in retreat. Constantly. Like, there was never a point where it changed back where Germany had the upper hand. At the end of this battle, Germany's on the retreat from now until the end of the war. So this was really, really important for that reason. Now, how did they do this, right? You shouldn't be, I said, well, they did this. This is a great turning point. Well, why? And how did that happen? Well, they developed what we call advanced operational methods, all right? So basically, they looked at how they were fighting and what they were using to fight, and they made it more efficient. They made better decisions. So they used scientific artillery methods. They had much more flexible infantry because they were using both tanks and aircraft at this point. And when you combine these two, this is not only going to allow them to be successful in the 100 Days campaign, but it's going to form a blueprint for future warfare, namely World War II. So after 4 days of fighting, the battle, and then that's another thing, you quit while you're ahead. People that go to the casinos and they're like, oh, I just won $10,000. I'm going to keep going. No, you started with 500. Cash out. What are you thinking? You've got 10. What's wrong with you? No. You know what they do? I could win so much more money. They get greedy and then they lose all 10 grand. And now they're in debt. They don't even have the $500 they started with. You see what I mean? The British, remember how I said they learned some important lessons? They learned important lessons. So once they started noticing that they weren't killing as much or as effectively as they were in the beginning of the battle, they stopped. Right? Then they took those forces and went after Germany elsewhere, where Germany didn't expect it. So this really set the pattern for the rest of their successes. Keep the enemy constantly on their toes, not able to figure out what your next move is going to be, okay? So casualties were significant, but the gains that they made were much more significant. And actually, on balance, the gains were much more important than the casualties. Germany was pushed back, all the way back to 1914 lines. All the way, so all the territory they gained up until this point, which we're looking at, 1918, right at the end of the war, they were moved just because of this all the way back to 1914 lines. That is very significant. And from that point, they moved in only one direction, backwards. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the end of our military technology and key battles of World War I. I hope you learned what you needed to, and I will see you next time.